He told her, flat out, "I think we should separate." No yelling, no furniture thrown, just a sentence that hit harder than any fight they'd ever had. Out of nowhere, Andrei dropped the kind of emotional bomb that makes silence louder than a scream. Elizabeth froze. This wasn't an argument. This was him pulling the rug out from under a marriage fans had built up as bulletproof, and doing it with eyes that looked like they'd already let go. Welcome to TLC Drama Live. I'm Sabrina. And if you thought this couple was the emotional anchor in a storm of chaos, buckle up. Hit subscribe if you haven't already, and drop your raw take in the comments, because what you thought you knew about Elizabeth and Andrei is about to be flipped, shaken, and dragged through every hard truth they didn't show you on camera. On a show littered with shady texts, cheating rumors, and toxic screaming matches. These two were supposed to be different. They made it through her family's mess, green card stress, parenthood, culture clashes, even the kind of on-air fights that would have tanked most couples. Fans didn't always like Andrei's attitude, but one thing was loud and clear. They were still together. Until the mask cracked. Andrei asked for a divorce, not during a blow-up, not after a scandal. In a quiet moment, when the only thing louder than his words was Elizabeth's heartbeat. One minute they were sitting down for what she thought would be a normal conversation about vacation plans, and the next, her marriage, the stability she built her whole future around, was slipping out from under her in real time. Andrei didn't yell. He didn't throw accusations. No listing of crimes. He just said it. Calm, cold, like it had been sitting in him for months, maybe longer. That's what made it worse. Because behind every perfectly filtered photo, every power couple caption, every family vlog showing laughter and milestones, there was this: a husband emotionally gone, a wife piecing together why he stopped looking at her like she was home. And here's the twist. No one saw it coming. Not the cast, not production, and definitely not Elizabeth. But now, behind the scenes, the cracks were everywhere. And coming up, we're pulling receipts, footage, accounts from people close to them. Because the moment he said, "I want out," everything shifted, and the world they built on trust, camera time, and tough love snapped under pressure. So, what pushed Andrei to that line? And why did the most solid couple on the show implode privately? Right when everything looked picture perfect? In the weeks leading up to that quiet bombshell, something shifted. Fans thought they were just more laid back. Less social media, fewer interviews, a little less spark on camera. But the truth was way colder than anyone guessed. Andrei hadn't stopped loving loudly. He'd started retreating. Not in grand dramatic exits, but in quiet patterns that, in hindsight, scream collapse. He wasn't picking fights. He wasn't storming out of the house. He was just less there. Shorter conversations, long silences, fewer jokes, fewer opinions, fewer emotions, except for irritation at tiny things, like noise from the kids or unpaid bills. He'd shrug off Elizabeth's questions with, "I'm tired," or "nothing's wrong," while his eyes said he wasn't even in the same room with her anymore. That's the part that hurt the most. It wasn't loud. It was silent, freezing, heavy. Elizabeth, who has always felt his moods before he ever speaks them, noticed. She noticed everything. The way he'd sit on the couch until 2 a.m., lost in a screen. The late nights out that had no story behind them. Even the way he'd turn away when she spoke about the future, family trips, birthday plans, long-term ideas. It was like every time she reached out, she hit a wall, but she didn't push. Not because she didn't want answers, but because her whole coping style has always been to steady the ship when it starts rocking. Be the peace. Keep the vibe calm. Smile through it. Hold it together, especially online. Their followers praised their home videos. Cute couple shots, dance reels, family mornings. All real, but only half of the truth. What wasn't posted were the long stretches between filming where Elizabeth would cry in the bathroom and dry her tears before going to make breakfast. Or the nights when Andrei quietly slept on the couch by accident. She told herself it was stress. That work, family pressure, and all their history were just weighing on him. She tried everything: empathy, space, lightness, acts of love. But you can't fix a marriage that pretends to be one. Andrei wasn't angry. He was distant. That's how she knew it was serious. Because when someone stops fighting, it usually means they already let go. And all that emotional fog, it finally condensed into one brutal moment at their dining table. One question, one casual topic, and one answer that would leave her spiraling, stunned, and barely able to breathe. So what exactly happened that night? When all those invisible signs finally collided with one chilling truth. The kids were asleep. The house was quiet, like the kind of quiet that feels too still. Elizabeth had made dinner simple that night. Not fancy, just warm. She lit a candle, maybe hoping it would feel cozy, maybe trying to steal back a bit of normal. Andrei sat at the table, his phone turned face down. No music, no TV. Just two people who had built a life around chaos now sitting in chilling silence. Elizabeth smiled gently, trying. Maybe we could plan a weekend trip with the kids. Nothing big, just something fun, she said, her voice light like a balloon, hoping it would lift the tension hanging between them. And then he looked up, eyes tired, shoulders heavy, like he'd been holding a weight far bigger than she ever realized. And he said it. I'm not sure I can keep doing this. I think I want a separation. No anger, no fight, just ice water through the heart. Her breath caught, but she didn't even speak right away, because her brain needed a full reset to process what she just heard. It felt like her body heard it before her mind did. Her hands started shaking. Her chest tightened. When she finally said his name, it barely made a sound. All she could manage was a broken, "What?" He didn't elaborate. He didn't backtrack. He just stared at her, not cruelly, not hatefully, more like a man who had been holding it in too long. That was the sharpest pain. He had meant it. He said he felt stuck, like he'd lost himself, not in her, but in the roles he was being forced to carry. Father, husband, constant outsider, televised character, peacemaker, and protector. Underneath all of it, Andrei wasn't angry anymore. He was tired of emotionally walking on coals every time he faced Elizabeth's family. Tired of coming across like the aggressor, the foreigner, the guy who always had to prove he belonged. Tired of playing strong while feeling inadequate, isolated, and misunderstood. And Elizabeth felt herself unraveling. She didn't know where her breath went, what expression she should make, what to say. Because nothing in her knew how to respond to that word coming from him. From her Andrei. And just like that, their perfect picture shattered without a single scream. Still, one question remained buried under her heartbreak. Was this a moment of mental exhaustion, or had Andrei quietly decided a long time ago that he wanted out, and this was just the first time he'd said it out loud? For years, Andrei had been performing, not just for the cameras, for everyone. From the moment he landed in the US, he wasn't a fiancé, he was a foreigner on trial. From the awkward dinners with Elizabeth's family to the interrogations about his finances and intentions, it was clear. He wasn't welcomed, he was watched. He fought to hold ground, to prove himself, hardworking, loyal, strong. But all that proving came at a cost. He carried it all like bricks in his chest. Every time Elizabeth's siblings raised eyebrows, every time her dad questioned his motive, Andrei swallowed it. Even when he got his green card, it didn't disappear. The pressure only shaped itself into something heavier. "You're not just the father, the partner, the husband," it whispered. "You're the immigrant. The one who has to hold everything up." He knew how he was seen online. He knew the villain edits came easy. People called him controlling, called him aggressive, called him an opportunist. There wasn't room in that image for vulnerability. There was no space to say, "I'm overwhelmed and I don't know who I am anymore." So he smothered it inside. He worked more, said less, held himself together like duct tape under pressure. Until that night, when it finally cracked. Elizabeth had never seen him like that before. Not distant, not even sad, but hollow. Like the part of him that knew how to fight for something had gone offline. And suddenly, every curated smile on social media, every cheerful family story she had posted, it all felt like a lie, not because they didn't love each other, but because underneath everything, he had been quietly falling apart. She remembered every moment where he could have said something earlier. He never did. And now he had reached the edge and just jumped, left her behind in the silence, and the fear hit her full force. What if this was it? What if no amount of love or effort could pull him back? What if their marriage, which she had fought for more than anything, was already gone? What if this wasn't a moment, but a decision? She barely slept. But when morning came, the world didn't. Andrei got up, made breakfast, played with the kids, poured her coffee. As if the night before hadn't happened. As if divorce was just a bad dream. No tension in his voice, no sign of pain or regret. A man packing emotions so deep even his own face refused to betray them, and that scared Elizabeth more than the confession. Because what kind of truth is so unbearable that it has to be buried again by daylight? The audience didn't see it, not at first, but something was changing, and the people who worked closest with them started to notice. The energy that used to buzz between Elizabeth and Andrei during filming, it was suddenly dull, flat. She showed up, hit her marks, said her lines. He responded, stiffly. There were fewer inside jokes, fewer off-camera laughs, no spontaneous affection, just two people doing what they were supposed to, like co-workers in a marriage-shaped performance. Producers have seen divorces coming before, but this one felt different. There wasn't drama, there wasn't yelling. It was subtle. It was slow. It was Elizabeth hesitating before every scene, her energy dropping the moment cameras turned off. It was Andrei walking straight to his car after wrap, not even looking back. At home, that performance didn't stop. Elizabeth's Instagram still painted the fairy tale. Birthday videos, family outings, harmless couple reels. The algorithm only showed smiles. Their fans double-tapped and commented goals, completely unaware that, off-screen, Elizabeth was barely holding it together. When she posted a throwback of their wedding day with the caption, "Forever grateful," and a heart emoji, she'd just finished crying in the bathroom. The woman who once posted in real time started scheduling everything ahead because she didn't have the energy anymore to fake it on demand. Andrei left the house earlier than usual, came home later, sometimes gave her a half kiss on the cheek, other nights, not even that. And the silence was starting to echo louder. Even the kids sensed it. Their oldest would ask simple, but gutting, questions. Why is Daddy so quiet? Why doesn't he kiss you goodnight anymore? Elizabeth smiled for them. She laughed, so they wouldn't worry. She filled the space with hugs, stories, playtime, everything she could to cover up a house that no longer felt secure. And Andrei, he wasn't cruel, he wasn't mean, he was absent. Not physically, emotionally. The kind of distance that can't be snapped out of, the kind that leaves fingerprints only on the inside. When the camera cut, the real damage quietly surfaced. Elizabeth didn't know how to talk about it. She kept hoping it was a phase. That stress would settle, that Andrei would come back to her on his own. She didn't want more attention. She didn't want her family involved, especially not her father or her sisters. Their opinions had never treated Andrei kindly, and she wasn't about to hand them ammo. But she was spiraling. At night, she lay awake replaying his voice, the look on his face when he said he wanted to separate. How cold he sounded. How final it felt. The worst part wasn't his distance. It was all the questions she bottled up afterwards. Did he really mean it? Did he still love her? Was her marriage already over and she was just pretending it wasn't? For the kids, for the show, for herself. She couldn't talk to her parents. She didn't trust production. She wasn't ready to admit it to fans. So, who could she trust with something this raw, this personal, this frightening? One night, after the kids had gone to bed and Andrei had disappeared into the garage alone again, Elizabeth picked up the phone and dialed someone who wasn't family, someone who wasn't in the show, and the moment they answered and said, "Hey," she broke down, full sobbing, shaking, no words. She finally said it. "He asked me for a divorce." The friend she called wasn't famous, not part of filming, not some loud voice in her family, just someone real, a person Elizabeth had known for years before any of this, who didn't judge, didn't poke, didn't post screenshots for clout. And when that friend answered the phone and heard only sobs on the other end, they didn't rush her. They didn't ask her to explain. They waited until Elizabeth could finally whisper what had been eating her alive. "Andrei asked me for a divorce." Those 6 words felt heavier than the call itself, because once she finally said them out loud, once they left her mouth, she couldn't pretend they didn't exist anymore. Her friend listened without panic. They didn't say, "Leave him," or "fight harder." They said, "Have you asked him again if he still feels that way?" The question haunted her for days. Because no, she hadn't brought it up again. Every time she tried to speak, her throat locked up. The fear was paralyzing. What if he repeated it? What if he meant it more than before? But the silence itself was breaking her. Andrei never brought it up either. He moved like the conversation had been erased by sleep. And maybe that was the point. Because Andrei didn't just bury emotions, he lived inside them, trapped. Raised in a culture where men aren't supposed to cry or collapse under pressure, where speaking about internal struggle feels like weakness, not survival, he was trained to carry pain like armor. He didn't know how to say, "I'm scared." Not of her, of failure, of being the outsider who never fit. Not with her family, not on the show, not even in America. Years of being watched, judged, edited, criticized. Every step came with the need to prove himself, to be the guy who always pushes through. The rock, the provider, the man. So when the pressure got too heavy, he didn't explode. He shut down. Emotionally, physically, romantically. That couch he started sleeping on, it wasn't about comfort. It was retreat. He wasn't trying to hurt Elizabeth. He was trying to protect her from what he didn't understand inside himself. Or maybe trying to protect himself from feeling like he had failed her. And in that twisted shield of protective silence, he left her completely alone. Elizabeth saw it for what it was now. Not emotional cruelty, but emotional drowning. And for that, she didn't feel hatred. She felt grief. Because the man who once stood up to her whole family, who once held her hand like it was a shield, now couldn't even look her in the eye. And she missed him. Terribly. The friend she confided in gently urged her again. Not to push him, but to ask. To gently open the door. One night, after the kids had gone to bed and half a bottle of courage sat in her chest, Elizabeth sat beside him on the couch, the space that had become a wall. She didn't have a speech. Her voice cracked as soon as she said his name, but she asked the question anyway. "Did you mean it when you said you wanted a divorce?" He didn't answer immediately. He closed his eyes, put his hands over his face, took the deepest breath she'd seen from him in weeks. Then he started to talk. Not about breakups, about everything else. And that conversation, raw, unfiltered, long overdue, was either going to rebuild a fragile bridge or finally tell her the truth she couldn't take back. He didn't look at her right away, just stared down at his hands like they were holding everything he couldn't say. The silence between them throbbed. Elizabeth waited, the question still hanging in the air, twisting inside her. Did he mean it? Did he want a divorce? Andrei finally let out a breath that sounded like it had been stuck in his chest for months. His voice was softer than she'd ever heard it. Honest in a way he rarely allowed himself to be. "I didn't want to hurt you," he said. "I didn't even know how to explain it. I felt stuck, trapped. Not because of you, but this life, everything I've been trying to carry." He didn't deny saying it. He didn't blame stress or pretend it never happened. But for the first time, she saw the man beneath the reactions, beneath the frustration, beneath the bravado, and he looked tired. He told her that he hadn't recognized himself in a long time. TV, the constant judgment, the weight of having to always defend who he was. To her family, to the audience, to the little voice in his head that kept whispering, "You're not doing enough." He talked about how scared he was to say he was struggling. Because in his world, men don't struggle. They solve, they provide, they walk it off. They don't admit they feel lost. Andrei had spent years carrying that armor. Somewhere along the way, it started to crush him instead of protect him. For the first time, he didn't hide behind anger. He just said he was lost. Elizabeth sat frozen for a moment, trying to absorb it. She'd wanted honesty. This was it, more real than she imagined. He wasn't angry that night at the table. He was quietly pleading for air, for space, for something to shift before he disappeared inside himself completely. She reached for his hand. He didn't pull away, but he didn't squeeze back either. His face was ashamed, not because he didn't love her, but because he knew how much pain he caused without ever raising his voice. She told him the truth too, that she'd cried herself to sleep after that night, that she'd been tiptoeing around him, terrified of hearing those words again, that every moment he'd withdrawn, a part of her felt like she was fading next to him. He finally looked at her. His eyes were wet, not quite crying, but on the edge. He said he felt guilt, shame, fear. That he didn't blame her for thinking he meant it, even if part of him didn't. That he lashed out not in anger, but in sheer emotional panic. She asked him something simple. "So, what now?" He shook his head. "I don't know, but I don't want to leave. I don't want a divorce. I want to feel like myself again. For me. For you. For the kids." For once, they weren't arguing, pretending, avoiding. They just sat in the truth. It didn't fix anything, but it opened something. The room didn't feel normal again, but it wasn't as heavy. Elizabeth felt it. That shift. It was real, but confusing. Because honesty doesn't equal healing. It's only the start. And in that moment, wrapped in silence but not alone, she couldn't tell. Were they starting to mend? Or were they still standing at the edge, barely holding on? People started asking questions. The kind of questions fans only ask when something feels off, no matter how good the filters look. Why weren't Elizabeth and Andrei posting as much? Where were the couple's dance reels and over-the-top holiday pictures? Why did their anniversary post feel like it was written by someone trying to remember what happy used to look like? And it wasn't just fans. Inside the show, production had been watching this shift up close. The spark Elizabeth used to bring to filming, the quick banter, the affectionate touches, gone. Andrei wasn't snapping or explosive. He was rigid, quiet, often staring past people like he was somewhere else. Producers are used to tension, but this felt frozen and real. They started probing behind the scenes, asking softly, then more directly. "You two doing okay? How's everything at home?" Elizabeth kept dodging, smiling, laughing it off. "We're just tired. Life's busy. That's all." But even that delivery started to crack. Andrei picked up on the shift too. Every time the cameras rolled, he looked like he was bracing. Not for fake drama, for real exposure. The emotional kind, one wrong edit, one bad rumor, and he was the aggressive immigrant husband all over again. Another round of internet think pieces shredding him alive. He hated it. Hated how easily a breakup, even one that hadn't happened, could get weaponized online. People started speculating. Reddit threads lit up. Gossip channels dropped videos titled "Trouble in Paradise" or "Are Elizabeth and Andrei headed for divorce?" Screenshots from old posts were resurfaced. Analysts picked apart old family fights like clues in a true crime case. To the outside world, pieces weren't adding up. And inside, Elizabeth felt like she was drowning in the pressure. Again, she kept it hidden for as long as she could. She thought maybe, if they stayed quiet, the suspicions would pass. That if no one said it out loud, the divorce conversation would stay locked behind closed doors forever. But on set one day, during a break in filming, a producer she trusted sat beside her. They didn't push. They just looked at her a little longer than usual and said, "You're not okay, are you?" And Elizabeth broke. The tears came fast. Not performative tears. Not made-for-TV meltdown tears. Real. She turned her face quickly, wiping them away like she could erase the truth. But she couldn't lie anymore. She sniffed, took a breath, and finally spoke the sentence out loud to someone behind the camera. "Andrei asked me for a divorce." The producer stared, floored. Not because reality TV doesn't come with drama, but because this wasn't drama. This wasn't storyline. This was pain. She begged them not to air it. Not yet. She wasn't ready. He definitely wasn't ready. Andrei still hadn't told anyone. He didn't want public pity, or outrage, or judgment, especially from Elizabeth's side, who'd spent years questioning if he loved her for real. He was terrified of becoming a headline again. One sentence, ripped out of context, could paint him as cold, cruel, unstable. But before they even had the space to make decisions, before they had breathing room to figure out what came next behind closed doors, another emotional shock was already on the way, and it would hit closer than either of them expected. It was supposed to be a minor scene, a regular family catch-up, Soft drama, nothing explosive. Cameras were rolling, everyone knew their roles. The energy was calm until someone made a slick comment. Not loud, not cruel, but sharp enough to cut. One of Elizabeth's relatives leaned back, half joking, eyes on Andrei. "Still controlling everything, huh?" Laughter from a couple others, all said in that polished, fake-friendly tone, meant to sound harmless. Andrei didn't laugh. He stared, face frozen. In just 2 seconds, he was back at the start, back in those early years when every interaction with her family was loaded, heavy, and unfair. Accused the moment he spoke, dismissed when he didn't. To the cameras, it probably didn't seem like a big deal, but to Andrei, it wasn't a joke. It was confirmation that no matter how much time passed, no matter how many birthday parties he showed up for, how many holidays he stayed quiet through, how many times he bit his tongue to keep the peace, it hadn't changed. He was still the outsider, still the guy they didn't trust. And this time, he didn't blow up. He shut down. That night, back at home, he barely said a word. Ate dinner, helped with the kids, went outside without saying where he was going. Elizabeth found him sitting in the backyard, hunched over with his elbows on his knees, staring at nothing. He didn't even look up when she stepped out. The hurt was heavy in the air, thicker than smoke. When she finally sat next to him, quiet for a while, she gently asked, "You okay?" He didn't move. Then he said it under his breath. "I don't know how long I can do this." Not loud, not angry, just broken. And Elizabeth's heart dropped. That line, that feeling, it was the loop all over again. The trauma pattern pulling them back into despair just when they thought they'd climbed out of it. She'd seen him this way before. Not explosive, but unreachable. And this time she understood it better. It wasn't about her, and it wasn't truly about that scene either. It was about years of not feeling accepted, never being seen as enough, constantly defending his character both on and off screen. She wanted to reach for him, but she froze. Any word could push him further. Any pressure might make him shut down completely. She wasn't fighting for the old version of him. She was holding on to the broken man right in front of her. She whispered, "I'm here." That was all. No fixing, no questions. And for the next hour, they sat in silence. Not tense, not peaceful, just still. Elizabeth fought with everything in her not to panic, not to spiral into believing the worst again. But inside, the question beat like a pulse she couldn't ignore. Was this just another wave of emotional exhaustion, or was he already mentally halfway out the door again? And too tired to say it? Did Andrei still want to leave? The morning was painfully normal, like the night before hadn't shaken the ground beneath her again. And that's what made it harder. Elizabeth moved through her routine like she was on autopilot, packing lunchboxes, tying shoelaces, texting the producer back about filming. But inside, that single sentence from Andrei kept echoing in her chest. He didn't yell. He didn't storm out. He said it like he already knew it was the truth. "I don't know how long I can do this." And she was back in that terrified space. The same one he'd dropped her in weeks ago when he first mentioned separation. That slow burn of emotional death where nothing is said, but everything feels wrong. She didn't know what had changed, or if anything had. So, when the kids were finally asleep that night, and she found Andrei sitting on the couch scrolling through schedules on his phone like nothing happened, the silence between them became unbearable. Not dramatic, not hostile, heavy. She sat beside him, not too close, not far away either, close enough to speak, if she could find the courage. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "Do you still want to leave me?" He paused mid-scroll, didn't blink, didn't answer right away, just slowly put his phone down, like the weight of that question made metal of his hands. Then he turned toward her. Really turned. Not halfway, not distracted. Fully. He reached for her face so gently it hurt, palms framing her cheekbones like she might disappear if he held too tight. And in that moment, his eyes told the truth before his words ever could. "No," he said finally. "I don't want to go." Elizabeth didn't breathe. "I don't want a divorce," he continued. "I want us. I don't know how to fix everything yet, but I know leaving won't bring me peace." Being away from you isn't what I want. What I needed was space, to be honest. But I never should have put it on you like that." His voice cracked. "I'm still figuring out how to be the version of me that doesn't feel broken. But I want to figure it out with you." She cried then. Not the loud, sobbing kind. The kind that comes with relief and grief rolled into one. Because it wasn't over. But it wasn't repaired either. It was still fragile. Still messy. There was no television ending, no violin swelling in the background. Just two people deciding not to give up that night. That's all. No promises carved in quartz or written in captions. They stayed on that couch long after the words ran out. No need to plan tomorrow? Not yet, because today they held on to something, not perfection, not certainty, not even full trust. She held on, not to the illusion, but to the possibility that shattered pieces could still fit again. And that's where they are now, still in it, still figuring it out. Filming continued. The pressure didn't magically lift, but something in Andrei softened. He was more present. Not every day, not perfectly. Elizabeth looked more like herself again, but with eyes that carried more weight than ever. They laughed sometimes. They fought too. But it was different now. Production picked up on the change. It wasn't performance anymore. It was raw, real. And then, halfway through filming the upcoming tell-all scenes, one of the show's longest-running couples, the ones viewers once thought were the quiet, stable ones in the background, had a shocking on-set breakdown that caught the entire cast, and even the producers, off guard. And now, you won't believe which other couple was secretly on the edge, while the cameras kept rolling.